Just outside Boston is a wonderful town called Arlington. And in this town, there's an iconic water tower, a beautiful old library, and of course, Spy Pond. And there are great places to eat. I'm partial to Tate Bakery and Jimmy's Steerhouse. But like in any community, there are times where people have trouble feeding themselves or feeding their families. And that's where the group Arlington Eats steps in. It started as the Arlington Food Pantry in 1991 and has grown rapidly over the years. Today, they have 8 programs that serve their neighbors. Each week, they distribute over 15,000 pounds of food to over 450 households in the area. My task? Make a cool cutting board as a thank you gift for one of their employees. What an honor. All right, so we're back to the scrap pile, 2 weeks in a row, picking out some walnut, some mahogany, and some hard maple here. I've got to get 14 by 7 inches for this cutting board. So once I measure it out, I'm going to take it over the table saw, switch out the current blade that I have in there, a general purpose blade, for a ripped blade. What does that mean? It means it's a blade that's really good at cutting edges nice and flat, going longwise through the wood. So it'll leave a great edge, one that hopefully I can glue right up without much work. And here we go. Now I know you're not supposed to use your carbide scraper on your aluminum clamps. But here's the thing, I haven't done a video yet on how to clean glue off all your crap. So that video will be coming, and at that point, maybe I'll get some of this glue off my clamps. Until then, I'm going to scrape away. As you can see, the glue line blade did a great job, and I'm able to just touch these with a little bit of 400 grit sandpaper, and they're ready to glue up. Now don't judge me here. You've probably put your mouth in way worse places than I did. Look, it's just glue. I know some kids have been eating it since kindergarten. I'll be fine. If you want to learn a little bit about the CNC software I'm using, keep watching. If not, skip ahead about a minute and a half. We're in easel right now. We're changing the size of the board to reflect the board we use and the thickness we're going to use. Now we're going to draw a simple square. As you pull it out, you'll see the square itself isn't the right dimensions, so we change that. We also are changing the corners to 0.5 inch radiuses, and that makes those nice soft corners you see. If we highlight cutting all the way through the board, you'll see that it literally would remove all the board. So we select cut on outline, and now you've got the outline of the board selected, and we change the bit to a more appropriate bit size. This says it'll take 32 minutes to cut this piece, so we're going to juice up the numbers a little bit and knock down this outline carve to under 10 minutes. 5 minutes, that's pretty fast. We're now going to copy the file a few times, so we have a master copy and then some other copies. The next thing we need to do is surface our board. Some people use a planer, and that works great, especially if you have a helical head one. But mine has straight edge knives, and sometimes on grain it'll tear things out, cause more problems than it's worth. So we're going to use the CNC, and we're going to load it with a big fat 3/4 inch flattening bit. Once we've checked our speeds, checked our patterns, adjusted everything that we want, that will be able to mill the board flat for us. And then we can always flip it over and mill the other side in the same manner. Now I like to name my patterns in a certain way. I use 75 for a 3/4 inch bit. 25 or 25 would be a 1/4 inch bit. So I name the bit to make sure that I have the correct bit, and I name the pattern to make sure I'm doing the correct cut each time. All right, now we've got to figure out how to put in the actual logo. So in this case, we're going to show you how to import and trace. I go to trace, I pull up the screenshot of the image I want to use. This image I got on the internet, for example. I now take it and I can play with the threshold and smoothing level until the image looks the way I want it to. Then I'll click import and the image will come in just the way we want it. Now you'll notice on this representation on the right, you can't actually see the image. It doesn't look good. That's because the bit is still set at a 1/4 inch bit, which is far too big to carve what we need. We're going to need to create a separate pattern called inlay and change that bit out to a much smaller bit. In this case, we're going to use a 45-degree bit to make that carve. And the next step is to download all these files. Then we upload them into our machine. And then I'll usually screw some things up. Maybe burn out a router or break a bit or two. But eventually, we'll carve some cool things. I like to use brad nails to hold down my material. They're aluminum, so they don't hurt the bits. Just fire a couple holes into them, and your piece is held down nicely. I ran this part without the dust collection, so you can see what it really looks like. My son would say, "That's so ASMR, it's so satisfying." Me, I just see a lot of dust I have to clean up in the shop. Now we're going to wipe a little shellac right over that logo. In this way, when we pour the epoxy won't bleed into the wood as much, and it'll make cleanup a lot easier. And now we're on to epoxy. I store my epoxy, as you can see it's a 2-part epoxy, in a garbage bag. Why is that? Well, honestly, the stuff I bought is garbage. It's pretty cheap, it makes a giant mess, and everything ends up sticky and liquid covered. As you can see, the hardener opens up pretty quickly, and you can pour it into a container. The epoxy, on the other hand, does not open up quickly. Check me out with the pliers, just trying to get the top off. When I finally do, I start giving it some shakes. And as you can tell, this squeeze and shake method does not work. So next up, I do my best primate impression, stick a popsicle stick into the container and get a small amount of epoxy out of it. Now, to waste even more cups, we take both the hardener and epoxy and transfer them to a 3rd cup. Well, in this case, it might be my 5th cup. But either way, you put them both into a new cup and stir. And I mean really stir. And if they don't mix properly, they don't set up properly, and you get a gooey mess. Please don't ask me how I know. After all that stirring, the final step is to add some black dye and stir more. But eventually, you've got a really great epoxy that's ready to pour. Now, anyone who knows me knows I'm cheap. I mean frugal. And the idea of wasting even a little of this pourable plastic seems like a bad one. So we're going to take this excess plastic, and I like to make these molds with random chunks of wood, different colors of epoxy, broken little bits. I'll add the new epoxy to it, and eventually I'll pop this up on the lathe and turn a cool bowl out of it. I've always heard woodworkers complain about sanding, but I never really got it before I started making YouTube videos. If my phone's recording and my computer can't be in the shop due to all the dust, how can I listen to all my good music? I'm gonna have to figure this one out, because sanding has gotten a lot more boring. Next up, I'm gonna grab my trim router with a chamfer bit, and that's gonna leave these nice pretty edges on both sides of the cutting board. Oh yeah, look at that money shot. Just a little bit of food grade mineral oil for the cutting board. So that's it, cutting board's done. We've got some mahogany, maple, and walnut in that board. Simple, pretty, effective. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, maybe got some tips and tricks out of it. Like it, subscribe, share with your friends. If you don't like it, why are you still watching? You just threw away like 10 minutes of your life. Go do something.